Big Shaq notices a pregnant woman working hard at a gas station trying to feed her children. What he does next will make you speechless. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel for some. The evening had settled over the city, painting the skyline with hues of deep blue and amber. The streets were quieter now, as most of the city's inhabitants had retreated to their homes. A cool breeze carried the faint scent of gasoline and asphalt, weaving its way through the dimly lit parking lot of a small gas station on the edge of town. Bright neon lights flickered above the pumps, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement below. Shaquille O'Neal pulled his massive black SUV into the lot, the hum of the engine low and steady. His day had been long, filled with meetings and public appearances, and all he wanted now was to get home. But as he rolled to a stop by one of the pumps, his attention was drawn to a figure moving between the cars. It was a woman, small and visibly pregnant, wearing a worn, oversized uniform with the station's logo faded on the chest. Her movements were slow, deliberate, yet there was a quiet determination in the way she carried herself. Shaq stepped out of his car, his towering frame immediately catching the attention of a few nearby customers. But he paid no mind to the stolen glances. Instead, his eyes were fixed on the woman as she approached a nearby sedan, holding a squeegee and a bucket of soapy water. Her gaze shifted briefly to the ground. Her face was kind, but etched with lines of exhaustion. It wasn't her appearance that caught Shaq's attention. It was the two children nearby. A boy no older than 6 was crouched on the ground, drawing on the concrete with a piece of yellow chalk. Next to him, a little girl, perhaps 3 or 4, was curled up on an old plastic chair, wrapped in a thin, tattered blanket. Her head rested on a makeshift pillow, an empty backpack. The sight stirred something in Shaq, a pang of concern mixed with curiosity. He watched as the woman approached the sedan, offering to clean the windshield for tips. The driver waved her off impatiently, and she moved back toward the gas station, her shoulders drooping slightly, but not defeated. Shaq moved toward the pump, casually observing her as he filled his tank. When their eyes met briefly, she offered a polite smile, the kind of smile that seemed practiced, a shield against the questions she probably received daily. "Excuse me?" Shaq called out, his deep voice carrying across the lot. The woman paused, turning toward him. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, stepping closer, her hand still gripping the squeegee. "Do you work here?" he asked, though it was clear from her uniform that she did. "Yes," she replied with a small nod. "I do the night shift." Shaq glanced at the children. "And those are your kids?" Her eyes followed his, and for a moment her expression softened into something more vulnerable. "Yes, sir. I don't have anyone to watch them, so I bring them with me." Shaq's brows furrowed, and he tilted his head slightly. "That's a lot to handle. What about their dad?" The question hung in the air for a moment before she answered. "He left," she said simply, her voice steady but low. "When he found out I was pregnant again, he decided he wasn't ready for more responsibility. It's just us now." Shaq nodded slowly, his gaze flicking between her and the children. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lauren," she replied, "and these are Jaden and Mia." Shaq crouched down to Jaden's level, his presence immediately captivating the boy. "What are you drawing there, big man?" he asked, his voice warm. Jaden held up his chalk drawing proudly, a colorful but messy picture of what looked like a house. "It's where we're going to live one day," he said brightly. "A big house with lots of rooms." Shaq felt his chest tighten at the boy's innocent hope. He stood up and turned back to Lauren, who was watching nervously. "Lauren, why don't you have a seat for a minute?" Shaq suggested, gesturing to a nearby bench. "I'm fine, really," she said quickly. "I don't want to waste your time." "You're not wasting anything," Shaq said firmly. "Come on." Reluctantly, Lauren followed him to the bench, glancing over her shoulder at her children to make sure they were safe. Once seated, Shaq leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "You work nights to take care of your kids," he began. "You're about to have another one, and you're doing all this alone. That's not easy." Lauren shrugged slightly, her hands resting protectively on her belly. "It's not easy," she admitted, "but what choice do I have? They depend on me." Shaq nodded, his respect for her growing with every word. "Do you get any help? Family? Friends?" She shook her head. "My mom's in another state, and she's sick. I don't want to burden her. And friends?" She trailed off, her meaning clear. Shaq leaned back, letting out a slow breath. He had met countless people in his life, but something about Lauren and her quiet strength struck a chord with him. "Lauren," he said after a moment, his voice steady, "I can't just drive away tonight and forget about this. I want to help you." She looked at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Help me? Why?" "Because I can," Shaq said simply, "and because you deserve it. You're out here working hard, doing everything you can for your kids. That takes guts." Lauren's lips parted slightly, as though she wanted to protest, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded, her shoulders slumping, as though a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had begun to lift. "Let me do something for you," Shaq continued. "I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll talk more. You don't have to do this alone." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Shaq replied with a kind smile. "Just take care of those kids and yourself. I'll see you tomorrow." As he walked back to his SUV, Lauren watched him go, her mind racing. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next evening, Shaquille O'Neal returned to the gas station, his SUV pulling into the same spot as before. The lot looked almost identical to the night before, but this time, Shaq wasn't here just to fill his tank. He stepped out of the car, carrying a large bag filled with groceries and a couple of toys for the kids. Lauren was at the far end of the station, assisting a customer with their windshield. Her movements were the same, steady and deliberate, but Shaq could see the weight on her shoulders from a mile away. As he approached, Jaden noticed him first, his face lighting up in recognition. "Mom!" Jaden called out, running toward Shaq. "It's the tall guy from last night." Lauren turned quickly, her eyes widening in surprise. "Shaq?" she asked, her voice a mix of confusion and relief. She wiped her hands on her uniform and walked over, glancing at the bag in his hand. "What are you doing back here?" "I told you I'd come back," Shaq said with a warm smile, crouching to greet Jaden before standing again. "I brought some things for you and the kids. Thought you might need them." Lauren hesitated, her eyes flicking between Shaq and the bag. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I can manage." "Lauren," Shaq said gently, "managing isn't living. Let me help you." She bit her lip, clearly conflicted, but eventually nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Shaq handed her the bag and motioned toward the bench they had sat on the night before. "Let's talk for a bit," he said, "if you've got the time." She glanced at the station, where a co-worker had just arrived to start their shift, and then at her children, who were now playing with the toys Shaq had brought. "I've got a few minutes," she said, sitting down. Shaq joined her, his large frame making the bench creak slightly. "I want to know more about you," he said. "How you got here." Lauren sighed, her hands resting on her lap. "It's not much of a story," she began. "Just life, I guess." "Tell me anyway," Shaq encouraged. "I've got time." Lauren hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I grew up in a small town," she said. "My mom raised me on her own. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, and I always admired her for that. But I swore I wouldn't end up in the same position. I wanted to do more, be more." She paused, her gaze distant. "I wanted to be a chef," she continued. "I loved cooking. My grandma used to teach me when I was little, and it became my escape. I even saved up to take a few classes after high school. Shaq nodded, listening intently. What happened? Lauren's expression grew somber. Life happened, she said. I met my husband, got pregnant with Jaden, and had to put my dreams on hold. It wasn't so bad at first. We were happy, but then Mia came along, and things got harder. My husband started pulling away, saying he couldn't handle the stress, and when I told him I was pregnant again, he left. Her voice broke slightly, but she quickly composed herself. Since then, it's just been me and the kids. I do what I can. The gas station job isn't much, but it pays the bills. Barely. I bring the kids here because I don't have anyone else to watch them. It's not ideal, but we get by. Shaq's jaw tightened as he absorbed her words. Her story wasn't unique. It was one he had heard before, in different forms, from countless people struggling to make ends meet. But hearing it directly from Lauren, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes and the determination in her voice, made it hit differently. You've been through a lot, Shaq said after a moment, but you're still standing. That says a lot about you. Lauren managed a small smile. What choice do I have? She asked. My kids depend on me. They're my whole world. Shaq glanced at Jaden and Mia, who were now playing a game of tag near the gas station's edge. Their laughter echoed in the cool night air, a stark contrast to the weight of their mother's story. What about your dreams? Shaq asked. Do you still want to be a chef? Lauren hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her uniform. I don't know, she admitted. Sometimes it feels too far away, like something that belongs to another life. Right now, I'm just trying to survive. Shaq leaned forward, his gaze steady. Lauren, dreams don't have to stay dreams. You've got what it takes, I can see that. You just need a little help. She looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. Why would you want to help me? She asked. You don't even know me. Because I can, Shaq said simply. And because you deserve it. Your kids deserve it. Lauren blinked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Shaq replied. Just trust me. I've got a few ideas to make things easier for you. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the gas station filling the air. Lauren finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, she said. I don't know why, but thank you. Shaq smiled. It's just the beginning, Lauren. We're going to get you back on your feet. As he stood to leave, Lauren watched him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She had no idea what he had in mind, but for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, a glimmer of hope. Shaq walked back to his SUV, his mind already racing with plans. He knew this wasn't going to be a quick fix, but he was determined to do whatever it took. Lauren and her kids deserved more than just survival. They deserved a chance to thrive, and Shaq was going to make sure they got it. The next week unfolded like a whirlwind for Lauren. True to his word, Shaq wasted no time putting his plans into action. Lauren's initial disbelief gave way to cautious hope as she saw the changes begin to take shape. It all started with a phone call. 2 days after their conversation at the gas station, Lauren received a call from a kind but professional-sounding woman named Lisa, who introduced herself as part of Shaq's foundation. Lauren hesitated at first, unsure of what this meant, but Lisa quickly put her at ease. Shaq told us about your situation, Lisa explained. We're here to help. The first step is getting you some immediate relief, food, bills, and medical support. Then we'll look at the long term. But first, how does tomorrow sound for a visit? Lauren was stunned. A visit? To where? To your apartment, Lisa replied. We'll bring some groceries and take care of the overdue rent. After that, we can talk about next steps. Lauren agreed, her voice shaky with gratitude. That night, she looked at her kids, who were sleeping peacefully on the couch, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to imagine a better future. The next day, 2 volunteers arrived at Lauren's apartment carrying bags of groceries, diapers, and toys for the kids. They also brought a letter confirming that her rent for the next 6 months had been paid in advance. Lauren stood in her doorway, speechless, as Jaden and Mia excitedly explored the bags of food and gifts. One of the volunteers, a middle-aged man with a warm smile, said, "This is just the start, Lauren. You're not alone anymore." Over the following days, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Shaq had not only ensured Lauren's immediate needs were met, but it also set the stage for her long-term stability. He arranged for her to take part in a culinary training program at a local community center, which specialized in helping single parents gain new skills. The program offered free childcare during classes, which meant Jaden and Mia would be looked after while Lauren pursued her passion. When Lauren arrived at the community center for her first class, she was greeted by a small group of other parents who were also learning to cook professionally. She hesitated at the entrance, her nerves getting the better of her, but the instructor, a cheerful woman named Maria, welcomed her warmly. "You're going to love it here," Maria said, handing Lauren an apron. "We're all about second chances and making dreams come true." For the first time in years, Lauren felt like she belonged somewhere. She dove into the classes with enthusiasm, her natural talent quickly shining through. Cooking wasn't just a skill for her, it was a joy, a form of expression. Maria often praised Lauren's creativity and skill, telling her she had what it took to go far. Meanwhile, Shaq continued to check in on Lauren and her kids. He visited their apartment every few days, bringing small surprises, new books for Jaden, a stuffed animal for Mia, and even a set of chef's knives for Lauren. Each visit strengthened their bond, and Lauren began to see Shaq not just as a benefactor, but as a genuine friend. One evening, Shaq stopped by the community center to see Lauren in action. He stood in the back of the kitchen, watching as she prepared a dish with precision and care. The look of focus on her face and the pride in her movements made him smile. After class, Lauren approached him, wiping her hands on her apron. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice teasing but warm. "Just checking on my star student," Shaq replied. "Maria says you're a natural." Lauren blushed, shaking her head. "I still have a lot to learn." "You're doing great," Shaq said, "and I've got something to show you." He led her outside to his SUV and opened the trunk. Inside was a large sign with bold letters that read, "Lauren's Kitchen, coming soon." Lauren stared at the sign, her hands flying to her mouth. "Shaq, what is this?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "It's your future," Shaq said. "There's a small space downtown that just opened up. We're going to turn it into your very own cafe." Lauren was overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. How can I ever repay you?" "You don't have to," Shaq said simply. "Just promise me one thing. When you're in a position to help someone else, you'll do it." Lauren nodded, her voice breaking. "I promise." The weeks that followed were some of the busiest and most fulfilling of Lauren's life. With Shaq's support, she worked alongside contractors to design her cafe. The space was small but charming, with a cozy dining area and an open kitchen where customers could watch her cook. She named the cafe Lauren's Kitchen in honor of her journey and the people who had helped her along the way. On opening day, the cafe was packed. Friends, family, and strangers alike came to support Lauren and taste her food. Jaden and Mia ran around the dining room, helping deliver menus and napkins, their laughter filling the space. Lauren worked tirelessly in the kitchen, her face glowing with pride and joy. Shaq sat at a corner table, watching the scene unfold. When Lauren finally had a moment to sit down, she joined him, a plate of her signature dish in hand. "To new beginnings," Shaq said, raising his glass of water. "To dreams coming true," Lauren replied, her smile radiant. As the evening wound down, Lauren looked around her cafe, taking in the warmth and laughter that filled the room. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, and she knew that this was just the beginning. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Explore our channel for more videos that will touch your heart and spark hope. Share this video with your friends and family to spread the message of kindness and compassion.